politics. Joining us in studio now is Tselane, who is of course no stranger here at the SABC News Channel. He's certainly been part of our coverage for much of the past couple of months. He's executive chair of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa. Dr. Tselane, Mr. Tselane, beg your pardon. Great to have you with us. Thanks very much indeed.
I was accepting the title.
You might as well be a doctor at this stage, given just how much we've learned over the past couple of months. I mean, it's difficult to tell because, we've spent much of our morning here at the National Results Operations Center, but the SABC has been, frankly, everywhere in the country. What's your sense about how the first couple of hours are going so far?
I think so far so good. There have been hiccups, and then in a big operation like this, you would obviously expect hiccups. You are dealing with human beings. They are the ones who are supposed to open the voting stations, and then from time to time you will find that they've got some challenges and difficulties in terms of opening the voting stations. But I think the Commission has acted very swiftly in terms of making sure that those stations that are not open are open, and then those that are still not open, I'm sure they've got mechanisms in place to make sure that they are open and that people who have registered in those voting stations are still able to go to the stations and cast their votes.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there was a map of South Africa, it's still there, showing us, parts of the country that are open right behind us. So the green, which is really everywhere, is, a symbol of where stations have been opened and on time. In fact, there's the map on your screen. And then there are spots of yellow, which symbolize outstanding voting stations. I imagine it means the IEC is still not quite sure what's happening there. And there's a dot, a red dot, I think it's towards the Eastern Cape there, of a voting station that's still closed. Typically speaking, how does the IEC deal with stations that aren't able to open on time? I suppose part of the plan is to make sure that they stay open for as long as they need to until everybody has cast their ballot.
Absolutely, the stations do not close until every person who is online at the time when the voting station is supposed to close is attended to. So I assume that in all the areas where they started late, they will wait until everybody is attended to, like they normally do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have watched a number of elections come and go without giving away your age in a way. And, the obvious question that always comes up is to have some kind of comparison around how things have fared in the lead up to this point versus any other part of our democracy. Many have billed this as the most contested election. The IEC has been dragged to court till the very last minute, and now the president himself may face some kind of litigation after his address on Sunday. What's your take generally about how we have kind of come together to ensure that at least today happens at the very least?
I think the Commission thus far has done well. You may recall that in 1999, when we had our 99 elections, we had pockets of violence in certain parts of our country. In the Ekurhuleni area in Mandela Village, there were a few people who actually got killed outside the voting station. We had again in the elections that came after that problems in Vuwani, problem in Beggersdal when we were preparing for the elections, and the Commission was still able to deal with those difficulties as they arose. So I don't think even what is actually happening in these elections is something insurmountable. I think the Commission has got the capacity to deal with those issues, to make sure that every person has got an opportunity to participate in the process. And I think the infrastructure is there, the experience is there, and the Commission will rely on their electoral staff to be able to do that. And I think the greatest safeguard for democracy in this country are the communities where the elections are taking place. Even though the law enforcement agencies are there, they will play a minor role compared to the kind of the safeguards that are there, that are given to the Commission by the communities. So the communities, it is in their interest that we've got a smooth election. I'm sure everybody wants to see the outcome of this the results of these elections. All the political parties have been working well in terms of making sure that there is stability in these elections, and I think they need to be commended for that.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's safe to say there's been a unison kind of appeal from across the political spectrum for tolerance at the very least. You speak about the outcome. After this, the focus very quickly shifts to the numbers as they start trickling in. From your experience, when does that typically start? Keeping in mind, of course, that this year we have this added dynamic of the third ballot, which means counting might be a bit interesting.
Yeah, I think the fact that now you've got a third ballot, it's likely to delay particularly the counting. But we should be able to get an idea by tomorrow afternoon, late afternoon, in terms of how the performance of various political parties is. And all of us are keenly awaiting this outcome. And I'm sure given the the polls that have been given, even the political parties are anxious to see how the electorate is going to vote, and then what the outcome of this elections is likely to be.
Yeah, I've heard that I think it's close to 50% of the world's population is voting this year at some stage or the other. We know that I think Mauritius is actually taken to the polls today, and the US later on this year. And the US is a big democracy. India has taken to the polls over weeks because of the sheer size of the people who are voting there. And I suppose this is a very roundabout way of getting to ask the questions around how you reckon South Africa compares when it comes to our ability to hold these massive logistical events, dare we forget.
I think particularly in the African continent, South Africa is miles ahead of many of our peers. And of course, there's a lot that we can still learn from both African continent as well as outside the continent. India, as you've already indicated, has got almost 700 million voters.
Wow.
So when we talk about the half of the world voting, I think the figure is distorted by the sheer numbers
India alone.
coming from India. So India on its own, I think has got massive infrastructure and the capacity, and the fact that they're using electronic voting in their processes has really created efficiencies in their system, and there is a lot that we can learn from there. As we may be aware, Namibia has actually even decided to use their EVF, electronic voting machine, EVM,
right,
for the purpose of their processes. There is a lot therefore that we can also learn from India, and in terms of how it is actually managing the processes, particularly because of those sheer numbers, as I've already indicated, that we've got about 700 million people voting when India votes.
Yeah, and we can never lose sight of that, just the sheer scale of coordinating all of this at the same time. There's been a lot of chatter on places like social media about the number of ballot papers that are typically printed, and I think it's worth ironing out the international standard, or the standard generally speaking. We know over 26 million people have registered to vote. The IEC has come out to say that they plan for 100% turnout, and I think if memory serves, they print just a little bit more extra just to be on the safe side.
Yes, I think it is important for them to do so because they never really know how many people are likely to participate in the elections, and therefore they cannot actually afford to have a few numbers of the ballot papers at the voting station, and it would create difficulties for the Commission if more people go to the voting station than they have actually expected. So it becomes important for them to make sure that they do not have difficulties in terms of shortage of the ballot papers. You may recall that if I'm not mistaken, in 2014, we had some areas where people were complaining about the ballot papers shortage.
Right.
And then these are some of the experiences that they would rely on when they plan their logistics, particularly for the production of the ballot papers, to make sure that we don't have the shortage going forward.
In other words, it's absolutely completely ordinary for the IEC to print more ballot papers than the people who are going to vote.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason why they've got to, even though they've done that, it is going to be important during counting that they actually account for each and every ballot paper, the spoiled, the ones that are remaining,
right,
and then those that have actually been used.
Sure, clear enough. I'm going to keep you here for a short while as we continue watching, of course, the election story unfolding in different parts of the country.